Hello folks, and welcome back. This is Mark Emery with the Lighthouse Law Club. Today we're going to talk a little bit about state citizenship versus federal citizenship and what we can do to apply for a passport. Naturally, if you've never done that before, you know that only U.S. citizens can apply for a passport for the United States. And in fact, we've even had cases where state citizens who have done everything they can to establish and protect their status as such, as opposed to U.S. federal citizens, have been hauled into court, and the prosecutor will waive as evidence their application for the U.S. passport as evidence that the person is in fact a U.S. citizen. And they say, well, you've applied for a U.S. passport as a U.S. citizen, so when you travel, you want to be a U.S. citizen, but when you don't travel, you don't want to be a U.S. citizen? And so that's the dilemma that we face. And so the specific application of a process that we'll be discussing here relates to how a state citizen can actually apply for a passport as a state citizen and not as a U.S. citizen. So this is very key in the change of status discussion, and a very practical way and procedure that people can apply in their lives to eliminate this one more trap that the U.S. federal government wants to lay for us, snare us into their web of U.S. citizen federal regulations. All right, so I'm talking here with one of the collaborators for the Lighthouse Law Club, and he's showing us what he's doing and what he's doing for our members to accomplish this and to resolve this issue. So let's listen in.
A citizen. It's not new. The concept that we've done or that we've helped people do with respect to their passports. But I had done my passport back in January 2001, because I had read a book called Vultures and Eagles Clothing. That was the first time that I learned about the process, or the idea that there were two types of citizens in the United States. Okay. And it makes sense too, when you have the Constitution making reference to the citizens of the states are entitled all privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states. The reference in Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution telling the federal government that they can't favor one citizen of one state over a citizen of another state, that there was an equality that had to be recognized by the federal government. And it wasn't until the 14th Amendment where they create this federal citizen that you had a citizen that was subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That was never heard of before the 14th Amendment. And really because of states' rights and the federal government not having any law to tell a state who their citizens are and things like that, it was the first time that the federal government creating a citizen that was subject to the Congress, which consequently would mean that this citizen wasn't guaranteed any, within federal jurisdiction, the Congress doesn't have to uphold the Constitution. They can have rules and things like that. Yeah. But it was the first time that these citizens, the blacks, who were offered this federal citizenship, guaranteeing privileges and immunities, as it says in the 14th Amendment, it was the states understood that this was an inferior citizen. And the Southerners, as much as they were giving up their economic base, it wasn't going to be anything that they had to change the way that they were dealing with these inferior citizens. You can see even today in the race problems that we're having, these, Lincoln and these Northerners still were recognizing blacks as an inferior or a second-class citizen. So it's really, you can see the results of that trouble. But over the years, you see that the federal government used to use the term American, started blending or using the term U.S. citizen for Americans, and then you begin to see them keep them together. And now by tradition, we have Americans being treated by the federal government as
U.S.
U.S.
citizens.
citizens, or
Right.
federal citizens.
Yeah, I understand all that.
Yeah, and it makes sense to see the violations, and then even then when these U.S. citizens are complaining that their masters, if you will, are overbearing, you see the Supreme Court just acknowledge or give more way in calling rights civil rights, where we're not describing natural rights. People don't realize that there's differences in that. And so with respect to the passport being a place where the federal government is establishing under penalty of perjury a United States citizenship, we have an explanatory statement that goes along with the passport process, 4-page affidavit, making certain points. We don't do social security numbers on the passport, and so we establish or reject the 14th Amendment citizenship, make the explanatory statement, create a new oath that's true and correct, and then we have some other about 6 pages of evidence that we utilize as part of that support. The State Department's always issued passport. Then afterwards, we will do a FOIA request to the State Department and get certified copies by the Secretary of State of the passport application and its documents. And then many clients will use those certified documents, present them as evidence in court, send them along to different state entities, and protect that state citizen over the federal citizen. Which
Okay.
This comment's been very good.
So how do you get around the signature on the passport application then?
How do we get around what?
The signature under penalties of perjury that you're a U.S. citizen.
Right. Well, what happens is that on our application, on the top and bottom and below and in and around the signature, we say see explanatory statements. And then above the signature line, we have all rights reserved without prejudice, non-assumption, 28 U.S.C. 1746-1, which is under penalty of perjury without the United States. All that is in the signature area. So with the explanatory statements, it clarifies what they mean. Now on the oath part, it says that if you disagree with any terms, or if you have anything that you want to add, you can add an explanatory statement. I have a letter that we put in there that was sent to me from the State Department saying that, and they make specific reference to the, adding United States of America after United States, or capitalizing the words letter C, all the things that we used to do where we would edit the oath. The State Department rejected those, our passports at one time, and said that we could add an explanatory statement if we didn't agree with the terms that were in the oath. And so that's what we've done.
Oh, okay.
So we have the State Department saying if you don't agree with the terms and the words in the oath, you can add an explanatory statement. And that's what we've done.
I've never noticed that before. I've taken a very hard look at it. I've submitted passport renewal applications with all zeros for the Social Security, and they didn't even blink at it. And so that was fine.
We don't do zeros. We just line out that.
Yeah.
We don't provide it. We have clients that have no socials. We put zeros in those places because in that way it's true under penalty of perjury. We're not saying that there's no social. We have caveat in the explanatory statement that talks about the use of social or birth certificate or driver's license, that even though we utilize those for identification, that we're not implying that you're a federal citizen. So we've addressed all those things in the explanatory statement. We feel that the explanatory statement is an intrinsic part of the application, which it is.
Okay, so it's really a matter of just including the explanatory statement with the application, and then what's the net result? The passport that's issued, is that any different, or is it just a matter of record as to what your status is?
It's still a federal passport. It belongs to the federal government. It's their stuff. In our FOIA request, we've now started asking, is the application scanned into the chip? We want to know what information's on the chip in the passport. We're going to see that, and that's more recent in some of the FOIAs that we have out there. And so we get that information as part of the FOIA request. It's on the FOIA document. The FOIA document, the certified documents from the State Department of the application and its explanatory statement, we feel is the most important part of the document, not the passport. The passport's their document. Mm-hmm. It's for them. The application, what you say under penalty of perjury, that's yours. The IRS prosecutors used the application against the Browns in New Hampshire, establishing their states, their federal citizenship, because it's their word under penalty of perjury as true and correct, not the app. They didn't just say, here's the passport. I've seen I've seen border agents say, oh, if you've got a passport, you're a federal, you're a U.S. citizen. They don't know what they're talking about. They're ignorant of those realities. They're not attorneys. They don't know what is on the application. What the application says, what you say about yourself, is more binding than their passport.
So you're looking to confirm if, in fact, that explanatory statement is included in the chip information, huh?
We've asked that. We've not had a FOIA since we started asking that yet. We've got a handful of FOIAs out there that are going to come back, and hopefully that information will be provided, unless they say something like, that there's some security reason. Okay. And then if that's the case, then I'll get a United States senator or congressman to overcome that, whatever the security that they say is in there. We're going to figure out what's on the chip.
Interesting. Yeah.
So there you have just a few excerpts of a much longer discussion that we had, and this continues actually along the lines of using the state citizen perspective that's used in applying for the passport, and using that documentation as, I could call it, a launching pad, or as a fulcrum to leverage into other areas. We went on to talk about how to preserve state citizenship status using this documentation for driver's licenses, voting registration, other things that typically only U.S. citizens are able to do. So it really gets to be quite interesting at all the different ramifications. We're not going to get into all that here today, but hopefully this has whet your appetite and given you a little bit of hope that, there are things we can do. Knowledge is power, and we hope that you'll consider joining the Law Club to empower yourself with some of this information and the resources and tools that we have. We're trying to free America one person at a time.